Hello and welcome to another episode of the IDRiM podcast. To continue our series on the GADRI Summit of 2025, we have invited Professor Andrew Collins from Northumbria University to discuss what happened during the first day of GADRI 2025. So welcome, Professor Collins. So first of all, could you tell us a bit about the vision behind this year's GADRI Summit and what makes it so special?
Yeah, this summit's clearly special for a number of reasons. Well, first of all, it's the first GADRI summit to take place outside of Kyoto, where the Secretariat is, in person. So we did have one outside before, which was going to be in person in Europe, but ended up in the middle of the pandemic, and that was an online one. So we can say it's special from that point of view. So it's a big step for GADRI to start moving this around the world. Also, it's 10 years since GADRI was launched, just after almost in parallel, really, to the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction in 2015. So it's a 10-year anniversary, as I'm sure you've already been hearing about in the previous podcast. But yes, so 10 years on, what makes it special is it's an opportunity for us to reflect on what we've managed to consolidate in this subject area, at the same time as face up to the challenge of what the next 10 years or the next 20 years even looks like in this subject area. So I think that's, for me, what is quite special about the event. Not to mention, of course, the usual variety of types of institutions which are part of GADRI, and the energy and sheer dedication a lot of people put to making this happen. That's also a special feature.
Yeah, absolutely. And also always on this podcast, I'd like to thank Wilma and Diona for their tireless efforts for keeping GADRI almost together during these summits. So this year's theme is about convergence for disaster resilience. What does that mean in the context of the summit, and why is it important right now?
Okay, well, convergence comes from a number of different stances, and the hosts have done quite a bit of work on this through the ICOR project that has been running from here with other partners in the United States, and that uses that concept. And the concept, as I understand it, because it's not actually a term I've used very much previously, but as the event is evolving and developing, I think we're developing an appreciation of what convergence really represents. So it's definitely it's an interdisciplinary concept. It's one which has brought different subject areas together. It's been known about. This is what I've learned so far from this summit. It's been quite well established in some of the physical sciences and infrastructural sort of practice areas. But in a GADRI context, of course, this has been re-examined and expanded much more. And we have even been hearing about participatory convergence from Laurie, who I think you're going to hear from later. So for me, I would say the convergence is a form of bringing things together in quite a sort of deep analytical sort of way, bringing multi-method approaches as well, and we've been hearing about different the integration of physical and social systems in the way we understand risk. So really, I think we probably, with these concepts as they come along or they get revisited, sometimes it doesn't have to have a hard definition. And I think one of the reasons for having the converging sort of theme in the event this year was really to get people to think about the different implications of bringing the user group, the stakeholder groups there are in disaster management, together with the basically the science and academic communities that are producing these different ideas, which are developing the techniques, and convergence to me speaks of an all of society approach. It speaks of making sure that there is application in the research we do. So it's just to say it's interdisciplinarity is not enough. It's more than that. It's about converging our efforts and combining our approaches. And of course, here in the title, you see it's about stakeholder engagement for resilience specifically. I find I'm very comfortable with this, because a lot of our work has always been about taking a developmental approach to disaster prevention and response, and convergence actually fits with that very comfortably, in that it's the process of building things up, strengthening things, building back better after disasters, building up resilient systems early so that we are prepared. And all of that is entirely relevant to the convergence theme. I'm sure by the time we get to the end of the summit, there'll be a lot more to say about, was it useful to focus on convergence? Is it something we were doing in any case? But the reality is there have been some good project works going on around that theme, with some well-learned experiences, particularly from here in the USA. And so I think that's, it was a good choice.
And we could argue that actually the idea of convergence really, I think, maybe this is my perspective, really became more narrowly, focused in on after the pandemic, where we had, we've got the societal interaction with the physical risk really was more highlighted to the public, and the public really trying to, and all these inquiries we're having now in Sweden, in the United Kingdom, looking at how we could have handled this, handled the disaster of the pandemic better, from a stakeholder point of view, because there were a lot of people who were not happy with elements of how we handled it in the first place.
Yes, absolutely. So I suppose we can see it on various different levels, and these themes are being addressed. And one level, it's converging subject matter and bringing together different sciences, plural, into one place. Responding to a more demand-led, problem-centered learning approach to the sorts of issues we're facing, right the way out to converging with big areas such as considering climate and conflict and development and disaster risk all in one sort of pile. I think it'd be true to say that a lot of people are uncomfortable with going so broad, in that there's a risk of losing sight of the real specialisms within that. And I detect that perhaps some of the, well, dare I say, younger scholars or early career researchers, or people who are a little bit closer to that end of their progress in the subject area, you have quite a challenge, because you develop your progress and your career chances on a very strong disciplinary focus usually. And when we talk about interdisciplinarity or converging, integrating things, then we are basically creating the challenge of what is it at the end of the day, where is the focus? But I think in response to that, it is needed by everybody that we use a demand-led approach. So we look at the problem, so what do we need to answer that problem? And usually that means converging a lot of things, multi-methods, multi-conceptual sort of frameworks. But the bit I haven't said much about yet is convergence is also about partnership building and bringing people together in a very practical sense. So I don't think we need to get over uptight about the concept here. it was really, I'm sure the hosts as well would agree with this. It was a way of getting people to coalesce around a quite strong sort of set of ideas. But there are many different sorts of languages out there which explain more or less what we're talking about.
Yeah, and also when you said about early career researchers do struggle with this, that is very much what I see working with them. And I mean, I was lucky because, and you know my background quite well. I started as a physical geographer who migrated to a human, so I can draw on both sides quite well and be more interdisciplinary. But what I always recommend to early career researchers, and I will do it again in this podcast, if you've got a research topic that you are researching on, go to conferences where it's the other end of the spectrum in terms of the physical. So if you're a human, look at the physical. If you're a physical, go to the human presentations
Yes.
on your topic area, because then you start to learn from the other side what they're dealing with. So then you can start trying to marry in your head the idea of what you are looking at rather than just staying in your single track. Because at the end of the day, if we all stay in our single track and survive it, it's very much you're not going to progress the science. It's like in climate change. If everyone keeps focusing on melt rates, or how much the temperature's changing, that's good. But how then do you fix the problem and get society to come with you? And that's the other side. So this is how I always view it, as a very much you've got to converge the science to bring it all together. So moving on, and I know that I think you've been to every GADRI, so this is the 7th GADRI Summit, and you've been to every single one. How has global participation and collaboration evolved since the last GADRI Summit, but also, since the very first one back in 2011?
Well, very well. I think in the early summits, there were a set of partners who more or less knew each other, wouldn't know all of the network, but there would be already relationships. A good example would actually be the Japan-UK sort of collaboration that was going on at that time. We did have a Japan-UK study program on DRR happening. But that's just one example. So there'd be lots of other bilateral links like that, and people who work together on projects internationally. So it's started like that. Now, what's different now is that you have a large number of institutions have joined up as members of an alliance, whereby only needed one person in an organization, a university, a research center, or another network, to be able to identify that they needed to be part of GADRI for the benefits of global alliancing purposes. So you just need that one person, but then that would open up, in more recent years, that opens up to a whole group of people who come with that, who would not necessarily have met each other or known each other. So the longer it goes on, the greater the potential sort of networking of people who can be involved, and the new relationships that are formed. So I would say that's probably how the global participation is developing very well. I could mention the regional alliances in that context as well. So they play a good role, because there are now regional alliances there's the UK alliance, there's the South Asia alliance, there's the African alliance, and there's NADRI, the North American alliance. You get the full names elsewhere when you do your podcasts on alliances, but these all come with multiple institutions involved in them, and quite a lot of people are hearing about GADRI through the regional alliances. So I think we can say that the global participation has evolved partly around that as well. GADRI maintains a very good relationship with the United Nations, mainly UNDRR, but not only UNDRR, other parts of the United Nations. That has remained strong. I think every summit we have had high-level representation from UNDRR, and hopefully that will continue.
Yeah, and so, and I can attest to this, because obviously, we've worked, UK ADR has worked quite closely in the last few years with GADRI. And also, the next week, we will be going more into the regional alliances, and we'll be discussing those in next week's podcast. So moving on, and looking at the summit so far, what role do you see the summit playing in influencing global or local action on DRR?
I think it's quite significant. Um, of course, well, I need to qualify one summit on its own, the few days, doesn't transform anything on its own. What it is a catalyst for a whole lot of other things that happen. And this is true of all, certainly all scientific or academic meetings that take place. Rarely can you come away and say that's changed everything. But I wouldn't underplay it. The role is quite significant because you've got to imagine 2 years between summits like this. There's a lot of things happen in those 2 years, and they happen partly because we're held together by the fact we are going to all meet. We do have sort of targets for things, and we want to be always moving in a forward direction. So I think a lot of it's gradual, but it's there, and the evidence is there. Each time we meet, we realize that we have played quite a significant role, and I believe that it will be the case for this summit as well. There'll be things come out of this will happen that will continue the process of influencing global policy. Come to local action as well in a moment, but starting with the global policy, I would argue that many of the ideas and consolidation of ideas that happen in these events do get quite quickly picked up by policy-making forums, particularly what we've seen through the progress of the United Nations affirms repeatedly that what they need is the knowledge environment to be accompanying it in its policy influencing environment. So sometimes where we don't directly influence policy, we are providing support to those who do influence policy. There's a time lag, so we might get a consolidated set of ideas come out of something like a GADRI summit, and it might be quite a few years before you then see the same language appearing in a policy environment. Is that just more talk shops passing on information to other talk shops? Well, a cynic might say that, but I don't believe that's the case, because the way people think will be the way they then make their decisions. And we see the evidence of that. So through the UN, I think we have quite a good policy on nation states who say that they agree with the Sendai framework, for example, or some of the other accompanying 2030 strategic developments that are hoped for. So at the global level, I wouldn't underestimate the impact. Now, at the local level, I would put even more emphasis on this. So individuals, many of the members that attend the summit work with local communities. At minimum, they usually represent quite a few people in their own organization. And that becomes, the dissemination of group collective efforts, the power of working together and gaining confidence in what we're really trying to say about prevention and response to major disasters, how we can build recovery into resilience, resilience into recovery. All these are very important ideas which need to have then action. It is possible to bring that back to your local institution, and then you'll find that it goes even further than that, right down into communities where people are running projects with local people. The mayor of your town, or perhaps you work in a way where you have the endorsement of some other type of local authority. I think one of the things we have been discussing, this came up quite a lot on day one, is, what level are we really talking about? My view is we need to take this as to as smaller level as possible. And by saying community this and community that or community the other, we need to be clear about who we're talking about. And when we say local level, do we mean, a whole region, or are we talking about right the way down to household level? And quite a few people attending these summits have projects where they engage with local communities. And within that, you can end up doing your analysis right down to a household level. So that's a multi-leveled approach. And this is where the impact happens. So I was very, very honored to be given the keynote slot for the 10th anniversary event the day before the start of the 7th summit. And one of the things I really wanted to focus on there was the question of what does it really mean to what have we learned about alliancing, and this has implications for what next. But quite a strong point that a lot of people really seem to have their own versions of the same thing, was about how we go right down to the very, very local level in terms of impact. I think there's many more areas in which we need to be increasing our impact, but we're trying.
I agree, and I think that, and from my perspective, coming up from climate change, where we've just recently wrote a paper on this, and where we've talked about local level and on climate, and how we say that people don't view climate change, as a major threat in their local community, despite it probably has, because they see it as a more of an abstract global idea. And it's the way that maybe we need to start tuning people's focus to climate change has been very much about bringing it more local rather than being big global. What does the UK do? What does the US do? What does Japan do? It's more about what individuals can do and local communities do, because it's impacting those communities rather than just impacting the global community. So now we're going to talk very much, a little bit for the next couple of minutes, very quickly on the first day. So to give a bit of an insight, we're actually recording this at the end of the second day, so we're going to go back and think about the first day. So for those who have not attended, the first day has very much been about, opening ceremony, and that's very much about a review of the activities, what GADRI's been doing, the structure, the welcoming. Then we moved into the plenary session, so our guest speakers. Is there anything we could have drawn from the three plenary speakers that we had on day one? That was Terry, Kit, and John.
Oh yes, sure. Well, we actually have to write this all up quite soon. We haven't done that yet, and you'll get access to that. So any comments I make are really just from memory on the spur of the moment right now. But we got consolidated notes from all of these. I'm trying to do this without referring to notes. I think it might be more interesting and see what comes out. What can I remember? What can't I remember? But yes, definitely, we had three keynotes. The first one was on by Teresa McAllister, the Deputy Chief, Materials and Structural Systems Division, and she's from NIST in USA. And this was about advancing community and regional resilience, addressing infrastructure impacts on societal recovery and stability. And we've heard about sort of quite systematic working involving multiple partners over here, and where they've basically used a convergence approach in bringing the different levels of analysis together, but the focus there really is to bring impact. We had Miyamoto International. This was an interesting one. This is more sort of if you like, those who work with the corporate sector and the role that it takes. And in the earthquake disaster assessment and reconstruction, there's sort of actually some overlapping messages with the first one. I think what they had in common in all three of these is the sort of convergence in terms of building models and predictions and assessments that then can be tested and built upon and find out what is effective. So we actually run a series of panel discussion sessions after that. You'll get more on that. I think you need to go back for the more detailed descriptions of those, but it'll all come out, I'm sure, in time. Off the top of my memories of what happened in yesterday's sessions, we had I think some excellent parallel sessions, the panel discussion sessions, and the first one was based on the progress and challenges for the final years of implementation of the Sendai framework across multiple countries. This is actually structured around the priority areas of the Sendai framework, the 4 priority areas: understanding disaster risk governance, investing in disaster risk reduction and resilience, and then enhancing disaster preparedness for effective response to build back better. Those 4. So a lot of people listening to this afterwards will be familiar with those 4. And I participated in one of these myself, the governance one, and it was quite interesting. If I just take that one by way of example, the way that the different speakers brought very different examples of what they mean by governance. And something we did agree on was the need to keep in mind the evidence base, that to be able to have effective governance of disaster risk, there needs to be evidence. So data and information featured quite strongly in this. And of course, that's also one of the committee sort of agendas of GADRI, is to try and improve data and information sharing and disaster risk reduction, as are quite a number of other organizations now. The UN itself has prioritized that. Number 1 of its Geneva action points, which were released last month, is data again. So we feel quite a responsibility there. But this was focusing on the governance aspect, so the governance of the data. And I think what we saw there was that we have to have really good scientific evidence to be able to do the governance. But at the same time, you have to have a good vision for what you mean by good governance to be able to have useful information and data, if you see what I mean.
Yeah.
So that was quite a strong theme that's coming out of that. And I think as that gets gradually written up, we'll see that probably featuring in the final document. Other areas I wasn't able to attend because you can only be in one at one time, but we're getting notes coming in, so we're still compiling that. So
yeah,
special moments. I think it was all pretty special.
Yeah. I mean, also one last thing that happened on the first day, we've had the posters and the seeds needs, which is literally a die-hard stay of every summit.
Yes, there was basically posters and people standing by posters and explaining the poster for those who had questions. And I got quite a bit out of a couple of those that I had time to sort of re-listen to in more detail. And they did turn into mini presentations. And I think that was the idea, that would happen. So I would say that was quite successful. But it didn't have the like a sort of formal series of presenting posters as such. I think quite a lot of the themes you see on the posters were echoing quite well with the content of the sessions.
Yeah.
So I think it was fine. I think we can get sometimes a bit too tied up about the exact performance of the format of the conferencing. Having said that, this has been well organized from what I can see so far. It's been a good experience. Everything's been running on time. Where we lose 5 minutes, we seem to be able to pick it up again quite easily. That's quite impressive, I would say. The timekeeping's been really excellent. I've been to many conferences, and often you can end up a long way out on timing. That hasn't been the case here. I would say this is run in a very professional manner.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Collins, for taking your time on a Tuesday night to record this podcast.
Yes.
And we will be back tomorrow with day 2 with Professor Laurie Peake of University of Colorado Boulder, who will give us a summary of day 2. Thank you.